It was my day off, and I decided to invite my mother-in-law, Wendy, for a walk since the weather was so pleasant. As Wendy and I strolled through the neighborhood park, enjoying the warm sunshine, my husband, Scott, suddenly called. "It's terrible, Mom collapsed, apparently." He blurted out, his voice filled with worry.
"What? Wendy collapsed?"
I asked, confused. How could that be? Wendy was right here, walking beside me. "Yeah, that's why I've decided to go back home for a while to be with her," Scott explained, his tone somber.
"I see,"
I replied, still trying to process the situation. While I struggled to make sense of it all, Wendy, who had overheard the conversation, simply smiled and whispered, "Let's keep this between us, okay?" She didn't want Scott to hear her voice. "Anyway, I'll be back by next Tuesday. Take care," Scott said hurriedly before ending the call. I couldn't quite grasp what was happening. A few days later, Scott finally returned home. "How was Wendy doing?" I asked, concern etched on my face. "Not too well, it seems." Scott sighed heavily as he sank into the couch, his expression grave. "The time we have left with Mom might be limited," he added, his voice barely above a whisper. "I understand." I nodded, my heart aching for my husband. Since then, Wendy and I had been in regular contact, making various preparations without Scott's knowledge. Unaware of our secret, Scott muttered,
"What a predicament,"
as he started fiddling with his smartphone. At that very moment,
"Will you marry me?"
my boyfriend asked, getting down on one knee in the middle of a fancy restaurant I never could have imagined visiting when I first arrived in New York 5 years ago. Today was the happiest day of my life. I knew in my heart that this was the man I wanted to spend my life with. It was a day I would never forget, a day I made a promise to myself. My name is Angela. I moved to this city after losing both of my parents. Growing up in the countryside, I was always aware of how freely I lived. So, when I first arrived in New York, I was overwhelmed by the towering skyscrapers and the sheer number of people, and I couldn't move for a while, frozen in awe and intimidation. However, having grown up in the countryside, I was unfamiliar with many aspects of city life. In my hometown, we never had the habit of locking the house when going out, and it was common to receive vegetables from neighbors rather than buying them ourselves. Of course, working in a company was also a new experience for me, and I made countless mistakes at first. "Angela, what kind of job did you have initially?" Scott asked as we enjoyed the lavish meal before us.
"I worked as a clerk in a commercial company. There weren't many places willing to hire me,"
I replied, reminiscing about my early days in New York with my boyfriend, no, my now fiancé. "Why did you switch to working at the library? Were you having trouble with your coworkers?" he inquired, genuinely curious.
"No, everyone got along fairly well. It's just that the company had incredibly long working hours,"
I explained, recalling the exhausting schedule. "Ah, that makes sense. Coming to New York so suddenly, you wouldn't have known which companies were risky." Scott nodded understandingly.
"Exactly. And at the time, I didn't even realize that the company was operating illegally. I was just being used for their convenience, but I thought that was the norm in the city. It's scary how you can get used to things like that,"
I confessed, reflecting on my naivety. Back then, I was desperate for any job that would hire me. With moving expenses and funeral costs, my savings were nearly depleted, and I needed to start earning money as soon as possible. Compared to my hometown, salaries in New York were higher across the board, and with the frequent subway services, I thought I'd never have trouble getting home. But reality wasn't so kind. The company I finally managed to get hired at required me to start work with the first train and leave with the last one every day. We only had a 30-minute lunch break, and going out during work hours was strictly prohibited. I was saving money, but I had no time to spend it. At first, I genuinely believed that this was normal.
That must have been tough. But what made you decide to become a librarian?
Scott asked, his eyes filled with empathy.
I had actually gotten my librarian certification in college. But when I first came to New York, I gave up on the idea because the libraries were too far away. Eventually, I made the bold decision to quit my job, move to a new place, and manage to find employment at a library.
I explained, remembering the turning point in my life. Was there a specific reason that made you quit?
One day, I saw a person crouched in front of an eye clinic. I helped them get to the station, but it made me late for work. My boss was furious.
I recounted, the memory still vivid in my mind. He yelled at me for about 3 hours, not just for being late but also for always working slowly and dressing sloppily, as if venting all his pent-up stress on me. The look on his face that day was so traumatic, I can never forget it. What? You were just trying to help someone, and they treated you like that? Scott exclaimed, outraged on my behalf.
Yeah. That's when I realized the company was terrible, and I submitted my resignation letter that very day.
I said, still proud of my decision. Your ability to take action is amazing. That's one of the things I admire about you. Thanks to that, we were able to meet each other. I'm so grateful. Scott smiled, his eyes full of love and appreciation.
That's true. I hope that person I helped is doing well.
I mused, thinking back to that fateful encounter. From the day I changed jobs and started working at the library, my life transformed dramatically. I had proper days off and could even take vacations. My colleagues were incredibly kind and patiently taught me the ropes, even though I was a newcomer. The salary was lower than my previous company, but being surrounded by the books I loved and finding fulfillment in my work brought me immense joy. After a few dates, we officially became a couple. I'm filled with gratitude for the books that brought us together. Oh, by the way, I'd like to go and give Mom the news soon. Do you have any free days coming up? Scott asked, his eyes shining with excitement.
How about next Sunday?
I suggested, mentally running through my schedule. Okay. I'll let Mom know then. She can be a bit strict, but she's not a bad person. I'm sure she'll accept you, Angela. No need to be nervous. He reassured me, sensing my apprehension.
Thanks. Let me know what Wendy likes so I can get her something nice.
I said, wanting to make a good first impression. Sure. Let's go shopping together. Maybe you could gift her a book you recommend? Scott proposed, always thoughtful.
That's a great idea.
I agreed, feeling grateful for his support. We continued our light-hearted conversation as more dishes were served. The food was delicious, of course, and the wine was so good that I accidentally drank a little too much. But I'll never forget the signed marriage license Scott handed me at the end of the night. It filled me with so much joy. I wished every day could be like this forever. A few days later, it was time to visit Wendy's house. I was a little nervous, as it was our first meeting. I woke up earlier than usual and took extra care with my appearance.
Welcome. Thank you both for coming all this way.
Wendy greeted us warmly as we entered her home. Thanks, Mom. This is my wife, Angela. Scott introduced me, his hand resting gently on the small of my back.
It's a pleasure to meet you, Wendy. I look forward to getting to know you better.
I said sincerely, wanting to start off on the right foot. As we settled in, Wendy, who seemed kind, began making small talk.
"So, Angela, what do you do for work?"
she asked, just as I was starting to feel at ease after discussing my hometown and hobbies. I sensed a slight shift in the atmosphere. "She works as a librarian," Scott answered proudly.
"Oh, a librarian?"
Wendy's tone held a hint of surprise.
"Is something wrong?"
he asked, picking up on her reaction. No, of course not.
"There's nothing wrong with that,"
she said quickly, but I noticed a shadow cross her face. I hadn't expected my profession to be a topic of concern, and I felt beads of sweat forming on my palms.
"I'll be frank with you, Angela. You know, the cost of living in New York is quite high, right? That's why I'm a little worried about your financial situation. Is this really the career you want to pursue?"
Wendy questioned, her words sharp but tinged with apology. I understood her worries. When thinking about the future, it made sense that she would prefer her son's wife to have a higher-paying job.
"Yes, I have no intention of changing careers,"
I replied firmly, despite my nerves. I knew I had to convey my thoughts to Wendy here and now. It was scary, but she was Scott's mom. Surely, she would understand. With that belief, I held my ground and answered confidently.
"I used to work for an illegal company, but I made the decision to change jobs and become a librarian. I believe that through books, I can bring happiness to people. It's the first time I've found a career that feels so fulfilling."
That's right, Mom. Angela and I met at the library where she works. It's like books brought us together. Don't worry about money, I'll handle that. Scott chimed in, supporting my stance.
"I take great pride in this job. If we ever face financial difficulties, I'm prepared to take on part-time work or whatever is necessary. That's how much I want to continue in this profession,"
I stated, my voice a little stronger than intended, but I wanted to express my thoughts honestly. Wendy nodded slowly, her expression still somewhat troubled. I see. Angela, I lost my husband and raised Scott on my own. I can't easily give my blessing to this marriage. So, I want you to prove to me, little by little, that you're a respectable person, she said.
"Of course, Wendy,"
I replied with a big smile, my voice filled with confidence. The tension in the room dissipated instantly, and normal conversation resumed. Finally able to relax, both Scott and I breathed a sigh of relief. The more we talked, the more I realized that Wendy was a family-oriented, kind-hearted person. Although Wendy's house was a bit far and we wouldn't be living together, I was determined to build a good relationship with her. For the past 15 years, I've been regularly visiting Wendy's house, just as I declared I would. While my first impression of Wendy was that she was strict every time I brought a book I had chosen, she would happily share her thoughts on it. Before I knew it, we were holding regular book club meetings over coffee. As a book lover, it was the perfect way to unwind, and I was thrilled to participate since it allowed me to grow closer to Wendy. I must remember to thank Scott for suggesting I recommend books to her. However, lately, I haven't been able to talk much with Scott. At first, our married life was blissfully happy, like a dream come true. Scott, who was kind and thoughtful, was the ideal husband, helping me forget the loneliness of losing my parents. He assisted with household chores and surprised me with bouquets on our anniversaries. Every day was filled with joy, but in recent years, there's no trace of that anymore. It's natural for the initial freshness to fade after so many years, but Scott's slovenly side has become more noticeable. We used to do laundry and housework together, but now he leaves everything to me. He doesn't even put clothes in the washing machine properly, and his socks are always inside out. When I pointed out,
"It's a hassle," If you have a problem with it, do it yourself, he said.
He stopped cleaning up his own dishes, refuses to improve his eating habits despite the doctor's warnings, and complains about the healthy meals I prepare. Scott, don't you think your attitude is a bit too cold? I sigh, looking at the leftover food on his plate today. It's a menu I designed specifically for him, as he's prone to iron and calcium deficiencies. He used to praise my cooking, saying it was delicious, but now...
Really?
He replied, sounding disinterested.
You come home late, and you don't even eat the meals I prepare properly.
I pointed out, my frustration growing. What are you trying to say? He asked, his tone defensive.
Do you think I'm your housekeeper or something?
I questioned, lowering my voice a little. In the beginning, he used to say that as a married couple, it was only natural for us to do household chores together, but now he does nothing. Yet, if there's a day when I don't make dinner, he gets angry and storms out. Having to do housework while constantly worrying about Scott's mood was becoming quite stressful. I was fed up with it.
I don't think that at all,
he claimed.
Then what's with your attitude lately? I'm not your maid, you know,
I retorted.
You think I see you that way?
That's ridiculous.
I'm trying to show you affection, but if you can't see that, then fine,
he said, his words dripping with exasperation.
Affection? I don't feel that from you at all,
I shot back. What about you?
It's because of my salary that you get to live in such a nice house, isn't it?
Stop complaining, he snapped before retreating to his room. I sank to my knees, taking deep breaths to try and suppress the emotions welling up inside me. This kind of thing happens over and over again. Whenever I point something out, he twists the conversation to make it seem like I'm the one at fault. We don't even sleep in the same bed anymore. Swallowing the word painful, I start cleaning up the leftover food. I wish my exhaustion could flow away with the running water. With that thought in mind, I washed the dishes alone, feeling utterly lonely. A few days later. It was a weekday, but the library was closed, so I had the day off. The weather was nice, so I decided to visit Wendy's house and invite her for a walk. Wendy agreed, and as we strolled through a nearby park, enjoying the pleasant sunshine, my phone rang. It was Scott. It's terrible. Mom collapsed, apparently, he said, his voice filled with worry.
What? Wendy collapsed?
I asked, confused. What was Scott talking about? Wendy was right here, walking beside me.
That's why I've decided to go back home for a while to check on her,
he explained.
I see,
I replied, still trying to process the situation. In contrast to my confusion, Wendy, who had been listening to the conversation beside me, smiled and said, "Let's keep this between us, okay?" She didn't want Scott to hear her voice. The atmosphere changed so abruptly that I almost cried out in surprise. "Yeah. But you probably have work, so don't worry about it. Phone calls and stuff might stress Mom out, so you don't need to make any," Scott said. "But don't you have work too, Scott?" I asked. "This is an emergency with Mom. Of course I'm going to take time off to go see her," he replied, as if it were obvious. "I see. When will you be back home?" I inquired. "For now, I'll be back by Tuesday night next week. Anyway, I gotta go," he said hurriedly before ending the call. I clutched my smartphone tightly, staring at the ground. As I stood there in a daze, Wendy placed her hand over mine.
"I'm sorry, Angela. Can you leave the rest to me?"
she asked gently. My heart had been pounding loudly the whole time, but Wendy's words calmed me down a little, and I went home as she instructed. From then on, I kept in regular contact with Wendy as we made various preparations. Days passed, and on Tuesday night, Scott returned home, just as he had declared.
"I'm home,"
he announced. "Welcome back." "How was Wendy doing?" I asked. "Not too well, it seems. I might have to go check on her every now and then. So there might be more days when I can't come home."
"What? Really?"
Scott said, his expression grave as he sank into the couch. I responded, my voice and face showing an exaggerated level of surprise. "The time I have left with Mom might be limited, and I want to cherish it. You understand, right?" he asked. "Of course, and actually, I'll come with you," I offered. "No, I want it to be just the two of us. It's our last time together as a family. Besides, Mom didn't think too highly of you at first, right?" he reminded me.
"That's..."
My voice trembled. Scott muttered, "What a predicament," as he picked up his smartphone. Seeing that, I couldn't hold it in anymore and burst out laughing, holding my stomach.
"Scott, you're the best,"
I said, still chuckling.
"Huh? What the hell, Angela? Mom's in critical condition and you're laughing? What kind of messed up sense of humor do you have?"
he snapped, clearly annoyed. Scott tossed his phone aside carelessly and stood up, approaching me with an angry expression on his face. I stopped him with my hand and opened the door to the adjacent room connected to the living room. "Who's in critical condition?" I asked.
"Huh? Mom? How?"
Scott stammered. None other than Wendy emerged from the room. Seeing her, Scott completely lost his composure, his face growing paler by the second. In contrast, Wendy approached Scott with a fierce intensity.
"What have you been doing this past week?"
she demanded.
"What do you mean?"
he replied weakly. "As you can see, I'm perfectly fine. What have you been up to?" she pressed.
"That's..."
Scott trailed off, averting his gaze from Wendy and falling silent. Of course, with a super healthy Wendy standing right in front of him, he couldn't keep lying any longer.
"Hey, Angela. What's going on? Did you call Mom? I told you not to because it would stress her out."
Scott snapped, unbelievably trying to direct his anger at me. However, we had the upper hand, so I wasn't afraid at all. "You know, when you called, I was out walking with Wendy," I explained. I showed Scott my chat history with Wendy. It clearly showed me inviting her for a walk since the library was closed and I had the day off, and Wendy happily agreeing to join me. "In other words, we knew you were lying from the start," I said, my tone firm.
"What? But why? I thought you two weren't that close. At first, Mom even complained about your low salary, Angela,"
Scott said, confusion written all over his face. "That was only in the beginning. I said those mean things to test Angela," Wendy clarified.
"Huh?"
Scott looked at her, dumbfounded.
"Even after I said those things, Angela still brought me recommended books and invited me out. That's a far cry from you, who never comes to visit," Wendy said, her tone dripping with exasperation. Scott remained defiant in the face of Wendy's words. "I didn't know that. And why didn't you tell me, Angela?"
he asked, turning to me.
"I did tell you at first. But recently, you haven't been willing to talk to me, remember?"
I reminded him. Of course, I never intended to keep it a secret initially, but his refusal to listen to me had come back to bite him. If he had known about my connection with Wendy, things might not have turned out this way. Scott hung his head, looking utterly frustrated. His phone was vibrating, but he was too dejected to pay any attention to it.
Remember how I told you that back when I was working at my previous company, I helped someone in front of the eye clinic? And that it was the catalyst for me changing jobs?
I asked.
I think I remember that.
He mumbled.
That person was me. It's a small world, isn't it?
Wendy revealed, a hint of amusement in her voice. Yes, that was the biggest event that brought Wendy and me closer together. While we were having coffee and I was reminiscing about that time.
Ah.
Wendy suddenly exclaimed.
That was me.
She said, her eyes wide with surprise. Apparently, Wendy had been suffering from a complex eye condition at the time and had come to the clinic for surgery. However, after the operation, she got lost and was at a loss for what to do when someone called out to her. Since it was right after the surgery, her vision wasn't clear yet, so she couldn't see the person's face. That's why she didn't recognize me when she saw my face, but she seemed to gain certainty after hearing my story. I was so happy to meet the person who helped me back then again. That's another reason why we've become such good friends. Wendy said, smiling warmly.
I was so exhausted at the time that I couldn't really see people's faces, so I had no idea it was you. I've been worried about whether you made it home safely all this time.
I confessed. Thanks to you, I did. Well, right now, it seems like Scott sees me as a terminally ill patient. Maybe Scott should be the one getting eye surgery next. Wendy joked. Scott, who usually has such a condescending attitude towards me, couldn't seem to win against Wendy. He opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but no sound came out. At that moment, the door leading to the adjacent room opened again, and a woman's voice called out. Scott.
Huh, Tina?
Scott stammered, his eyes widening in shock. Good evening. It's been a day, hasn't it? Tina said, smiling sadly as she faced Scott. Tina was a little younger than me, with well-defined features and a slender figure that looked great in her floral dress. Seeing her shoulders tremble slightly, I felt a strong urge to protect her. I could understand a little why Scott might have fallen for her.
Why is Tina here?
Scott asked, his voice shaking.
After we parted ways yesterday, I went home and found these people there.
They told me everything. You were married, weren't you? Tina said, her tone a mix of hurt and accusation.
How did you find out?
Scott mumbled, avoiding eye contact.
I hired a private investigator to look into everything. Over the past week.
Wendy explained. A week ago, right after I hung up on Scott's call. Wendy sent me home and immediately headed to a detective agency. She told them she wanted them to investigate her son's infidelity right away, no matter how much it cost. As a result, evidence was quickly gathered, and they were able to identify Tina's home and contact her.
Scott, you got along well with my parents too, didn't you? My mom and dad are furious. Of course, I am too. I brought them here today because I wanted to resolve this issue.
Tina said, her voice trembling with emotion. According to the investigation, Tina was apparently a client at Scott's company, and they both fell in love at first sight, as she told us herself. Tina didn't know Scott was married, and she apologized, saying that if she had known, she never would have gotten involved with him. Her parents, who had been looking forward to their marriage, were outraged when they learned about Scott's true identity and apologized to me sincerely afterward. Tina and her parents had done nothing wrong, yet they apologized to me, which made my heart ache and fueled my anger towards Scott even more. That's why I also apologized to Tina and her parents and suggested that we come here today.
So, Scott's infidelity has been completely exposed. I'll give you a lawyer's contact information later, and you can handle the rest through them.
I said, my voice steady despite the overwhelming emotions.
How do you plan on surviving without me? The cost of living has skyrocketed compared to the past. You can't live on your salary alone.
Scott glared at me, his anger palpable. I felt my body tense up a bit, but Wendy stepped in front of us as if to shield me from his wrath. Actually, I've started something recently, Wendy said, showing Scott a screen on her smartphone.
Huh? What's this?
He asked, confusion written all over his face.
I've started investing in real estate lately. It's been incredibly profitable. That's why I could afford the high costs of hiring a detective,
Wendy explained, a hint of pride in her voice. What Wendy showed him was a graph of her investments. She had already been studying a bit, and her investments were a huge success. Of course, I also helped out by putting the knowledge I'd gained from university and my beloved books to good use. By now, her profits had easily surpassed Scott's salary.
So, you don't need to worry about money on our end. You, on the other hand, will be facing alimony and settlement claims in the divorce proceedings, leading to a life of poverty. I think you should worry about yourself,
Wendy said, her tone sharp and unforgiving.
What? Alimony and settlement claims in a divorce? You're joking, right?
Scott scoffed, disbelief etched on his features.
No, it's only natural since you cheated. You'll be paying for both my share and Tina's,
I stated firmly, leaving no room for argument. Scott muttered,
This can't be happening.
But then a wicked smile spread across his face as if he had thought of something. He stood up triumphantly and pointed at me. Too bad for you, Angela.
I have Mom's inheritance. I can easily pay the alimony and settlement for the divorce. But I'll be able to return to my original lifestyle in no time,
he declared, his voice dripping with arrogance.
How on earth did you become so stupid?
Wendy sighed, holding her head in exasperation as she stood beside me. I couldn't agree more. Come on, Mom. This is a critical moment for your precious son. Please help me out. Scott pleaded, his tone suddenly desperate.
Scott, you are indeed my dear son. But I don't remember raising you to do such inhumane things,
Wendy said, her voice filled with disappointment.
What?
Scott's eyes widened in shock.
I'm cutting ties with you. From now on, you'll have to live on your own,
she announced, her words like a hammer striking the final blow.
You can't be serious. What about the inheritance then?
He asked, grasping at straws.
I'm thinking of giving it to Angela,
Wendy replied, her voice unwavering. I couldn't help but exclaim. What? I had heard that she was considering disowning him, but she hadn't said a word about the inheritance. However, knowing that she cherished me to that extent brought tears of joy to my eyes, especially since I had lost my own parents.
Angela, if it's all right with you, would you like us to become a real mother and daughter?
Wendy asked, her voice filled with warmth and sincerity. Those words made my body feel hot with emotion. They were the words I had longed to hear.
Ever since my parents passed away, I've been so lonely. Are you really sure about this?
I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of hope and disbelief.
Of course. I look forward to being your mother from now on,
Wendy replied, her smile radiating love and acceptance. Wendy, no, Mom opened her arms and faced me, and I didn't hesitate to rush into her embrace. Ah, the warmth of a mother's hug, something I hadn't felt in so long. Today might have been the worst day of my life, but it was also the best. Seeing us like that, Scott raised his voice.
This can't be real.
And he shouted.
I see, Angela. So this was your plan from the beginning, wasn't it? You got close to me because you were after Mom's inheritance, and you deceived her,"
he accused, his face red with anger. I had just one thing to say to Scott as he yelled at me with fury etched on his features. "You brought this upon yourself." I felt like the emotions I had bottled up for years were finally being released. From now on, I could live freely with Wendy, no longer bound by Scott's whims. "By the way, this has been ringing non-stop." "Here you go," Tina said, handing Scott his vibrating phone. As he angrily answered the call, a man's furious voice could be heard shouting, "You're fired! Trouble with a client? Marriage fraud? There must be some mistake." Scott stammered, his face turning pale as he desperately tried to explain himself, but he was quickly cut off, leaving him helpless. In front of a completely deflated Scott, only Tina stood, smiling just as she had at the beginning.
"Tina, you're on my side, right?"
Scott pleaded, reaching out to her as if she were his last hope. But Tina swatted his hand away. "Scott, I went through a terrible divorce in the past, and I truly believed that this time I could find happiness," she said, her voice filled with disappointment and hurt. "Tina," Scott whispered, his eyes wide with desperation.
"But it turns out you were just the same as my ex. I'm the one who reported you to the company. Goodbye,"
Tina declared before heading towards the front door. Wendy followed after her. I handed Scott, who must have been facing true despair, the divorce papers I had signed, and then I left the house. After that, Scott seemed to have surrendered, and the divorce was finalized surprisingly easily. After receiving a hefty alimony payment from the divorce settlement, Wendy and I moved into an apartment to avoid any potential attacks from Scott. I heard rumors about how Scott was doing afterwards, apparently struggling to find a new job. It's no wonder, since we had spread the word about his misdeeds, making it difficult for him to find employment in the same industry. I hope he's living a life of poverty now. "Good morning, Wendy," I greeted her with a smile.
"Good morning, Angela. It's a beautiful day, isn't it?"
she replied, her eyes twinkling with joy. "How about we have a picnic in that big park?" I suggested, feeling the warmth of the sun on my skin. "That sounds lovely. Shall we make some sandwiches to take with us?" Wendy proposed, already heading towards the kitchen. Meanwhile, I was living peacefully with Wendy in our apartment. We studied real estate investing together and frequented the library. On our days off, we would go out, share our thoughts on books, and enjoy the leisurely pace of life. Our investments continue to be successful, and Wendy's savings keep growing. Spending time with my beloved books and my dear Wendy, I am truly happy now.
"I forgot to buy it."
My husband, William, laughed merrily as soon as I cornered him. He must have deliberately not bought only my ticket.
"Oh, William, you klutz."
Carol, my mother-in-law, was laughing so hard, holding her stomach, as she called out to William. Everyone was laughing uproariously, and I felt really sick.
"That's fine. I'll just go home,"
I said with a sigh.
Do that. A fancy hotel doesn't suit someone like you, right? It's for the better."
William was smiling.
"Don't go dining out alone and splurge, okay? I'll be checking the receipts afterward,"
Carol said with a laugh and a condescending tone.
"All right, now that it's decided, let's hurry and go."
Donald, my father-in-law, cheerfully called out to William and his wife, and they headed to the boarding gate. How low do these people think of me? I can never forgive them. I took out my mobile phone and called someone. Surely, the three of them will regret this. I am Jessica. I turned 50 this year. Currently, I live with my husband, William. Donald and Carol live nearby, about a 15-minute walk from our house. I met William over 20 years after becoming a working adult. In my current job, I'm in charge of sales. Recently, I haven't been able to achieve my sales targets, and going to work every day has been depressing. Naturally, my spirits are low. Under such circumstances, sales don't follow. Being scolded by my boss for poor sales performance only made me dread going to work more. I felt like I was caught in a negative loop. That's when I met William. We met in the break room of the 10-story building where I work. This building houses several companies, and there's a communal break room on the 3rd floor. During lunch break, female employees from other floors would eat sandwiches they brought. After being scolded by my boss, I would often rest in this break room. And today, after failing to meet my sales targets again and being loudly scolded by my boss in front of everyone, I was sitting alone on a chair, feeling down. Then William approached me. "Are you okay? You look so gloomy." Actually, having been approached by William, whom I met for the first time, I confided in him about my work troubles. Perhaps because William was from a different company, I felt comfortable talking to him. William listened to me with empathy. After our conversation, William said to me,
"From now on, I'll listen to you. So, let's exchange contact information."
"Thank you so much." I nearly cried from William's kindness, but managed to answer with a smile. I think I already liked William at that time. William and I gradually became close. We started dating and, after a while, began a relationship. Then, a year into our relationship, William proposed, and we decided to get married. As soon as we decided to marry, we met Donald and Carol.
"We're looking forward to it. As for helping us out, just do what you can without overdoing it."
Carol was smiling and seemed kind.
"Once you marry William, let's all go on a trip together,"
Donald said, laughing heartily. Donald seemed like a regular person, and I felt reassured. Then the two of us decided not to have children. I was in my late 40s when I married William. Having a child at this point would put a lot of strain on my body. Besides, William also said,
"I want to live a life with some financial leeway. I also want to take care of my parents."
I agreed with William's suggestion, wanting to work hard at my job too. And so, we bought a new house together. We combined our savings to buy it outright, though it was a small house. Would become even happier. I believed so. However, I came to realize that it was all an illusion. Since getting married, I've been frequently troubled by Donald and Carol. For example, their sudden visits. Ever since William and I bought our house and started living there, Donald and Carol would come over without contacting us first. Then, they would point out in detail how I was lacking as a housewife. At worst, they would open the fridge and closets without permission and check their contents. Then they would scold me while screaming,
"What's with this fridge? There's only cheap supermarket beef in here. You're feeding this to William?"
Carol would scream upon opening the fridge today, as usual. "Well, we can't exactly buy expensive meat all the time. We used up our savings because we bought the house outright. That's why we're trying to save as much as possible." So, when Carol complains like that, it puts me in a difficult position. I had no choice but to endure Carol's criticisms. Then, one day, once again, Donald and Carol came to our house. As usual, Carol brought a large paper bag, intending to take something from our house. Initially, Donald and Carol would come empty-handed, but after a few visits, they started bringing a large paper bag. And every time, they would take away a large amount of food and daily supplies from our house. Everything Donald and Carol took was paid for out of my wallet. I was becoming increasingly uncomfortable with Donald and Carol's lack of restraint. As I was feeling bewildered by Donald and Carol, Carol picked a dress from my closet.
"What is this dress? It looks expensive. You're wasting money again." "Ah, that's..."
I couldn't help but raise my voice. Carol was holding and showing off my dress. Seeing the dress, I turned pale.
"Carol, please don't open it without permission. And that dress is a birthday present from my mom. Please, give it back."
I desperately tried to get the dress back from Carol. In fact, this dress was something my mom had cherished for a long time. For work, my mom would wear famous brand clothes when going to clients. This dress was given to me by my mom.
"Jessica, you're old enough now. Become a dignified woman like me."
So, this is something I cannot give to Carol. However, Carol looked at the dress and laughed.
This kind of nice dress is still too early for you. I'll wear it for you. Be grateful. How could you? It's a birthday present from my mom, you know?
I was on the verge of tears. Then William, who had been watching the whole time, said with a laugh,
Mom's offering to wear it for you. Be thankful. You're a wife of the Smith family. It's a wife's duty to listen to Mom, isn't it?
William always tried to make me concede with the phrase wife of the Smith family. This wasn't something new. On the first weekend after we got married, when I was called to the in-laws' house from the morning and told to weed the garden, William said that.
It's a rule for the wife of the Smith family. Now, get on with it.
William sounded as if he was someone of higher status, using his position to act superior. But I didn't want to give up the dress. As I stayed silent, feeling humiliated, Donald said authoritatively,
William took an older wife, and we can't even see a grandchild's face. At the very least, doing us favors is your duty, isn't it?
Even though I'm the same age as William, Donald's notion that it's okay for a man but not for a woman irritates me.
Yeah, exactly, Dad's right. So, give the dress to Mom.
William nodded as if it was only natural.
How terrible!
There's not a single ally in this house. No matter what I say, I'm made out to be the villain. Carol was happily putting the dress into the paper bag. So, I reluctantly complied with William, Donald, and Carol. And the problem isn't just Donald and Carol. There's also a big problem with William. Recently, William has been coming home late, and there have been many days we haven't eaten dinner together.
I'm home.
Today again, William comes home at 1 a.m. in a good mood. He must have been drinking. His face is red. Welcome back. I greet William with a puzzled look. William, without caring about how I feel, spoke to me.
I'm going to take a shower. Can you put away my bag for me?
William hands me his bag and heads straight to the shower. It's always like this, I say in disbelief as I go to put his bag in his room. Then, I heard a notification sound from a mobile phone inside the bag. William left his mobile phone in his bag again. William always carries his mobile phone with him, but today, perhaps because he's drunk, he forgot it in his bag. If it's an emergency work call, it could be serious. I gently take William's mobile phone out of the bag. And as I look at the screen to check, I freeze.
What is this?
Displayed on the mobile phone was the name Lisa.
Today was so much fun. But it got late, haven't your wife noticed? I'm worried. Love, Lisa.
Reading this text, I was convinced of William's affair. Then, there were several more texts from Lisa. Some of them were explicit, and it became clear that William had been cheating for a long time. I took photos of the mobile phone screen expressionlessly, one after another. I thought this would be useful as evidence of William's infidelity when the time comes. However, this alone wasn't enough as proof. I sighed. Besides, I'm already 50, and it would be difficult to remarry after leaving William. Without children, the thought of being alone from now on was mentally tough. What should I do now? Holding William's mobile phone, I was at a loss. Then one day, William said to me,
The anniversary of Mom and Dad's wedding is coming up. Hurry up and plan the trip.
William expected me to act as if it were a given. I understand. I could only nod in agreement with William. Every year, we present a trip to Donald and Carol for their wedding anniversary. Of course, William and I also accompany them, catering to Donald and Carol. We have been booking the same hotel every year, and I plan to book it again this year. But then, William suddenly said something unexpected.
That's right. Since it's the 50th anniversary of Mom and Dad's marriage this year, book a special hotel for them, will you? What?
I was bewildered. The usual hotel was already quite high grade. Moreover, the cost of the hotel is all paid from my salary. William would say,
Paying for the trip and showing filial piety is the role of a son's wife. It's my role to have fun there and show them a good time.
That's why booking a too expensive hotel would only increase my burden. As I was puzzled, William said in a bad mood,
It's their 50th wedding anniversary. Don't you have any respect for my parents?
William continued to nag, insisting on how I lacked awareness as a wife. Exhausted by William's lecture, I simply replied, I got it, and ended the conversation. When thinking of a higher grade hotel, only one hotel came to mind. The reservation process for it was a bit special. After successfully making the reservation, I approached William. "I've booked the hotel," William said with a nasty smile. "Make sure it's a hotel that I like, okay? I won't accept it if it's an inferior hotel." William looked ready to find fault with an unpleasant face. I sighed at William and replied, "It's a distance by plane, but it's a respectable hotel. Look, this should satisfy you, right?" Showing him the hotel's homepage on the mobile phone, William nodded in satisfaction.
"Well, this is barely acceptable. Have you booked the flight yet?"
"Not yet. It shouldn't be crowded this time of year, and it's a weekday. I think booking a flight won't be an issue." As I answered, William said something unexpected.
"I'll book the flight."
This was a sudden offer from William, who had never taken initiative before. Surprised, I asked,
"Really?"
Then William smiled broadly.
"Yeah. You always works hard, so I can at least book the flight. Thanks for everything."
"Thank you." I sincerely thanked William. I thought William was finally becoming cooperative. Maybe William was starting to change. That's what I hoped. However, my decision at that moment would greatly shake the situation. On the day of the trip, William went to pick up Donald and Carol first, so I was to meet them at the airport.
"Sorry to keep you waiting."
Arriving with my and William's luggage, William and the others were already at the meeting spot. And for some reason, Donald, Carol, and William were smiling maliciously. I had a bad feeling. As I thought this and looked at their hands, each was holding a plane ticket. I called out to William,
"Can I get my plane ticket too?"
Then, in the next moment, William said something unbelievable.
"I forgot to buy it."
William was laughing cheerfully. "Just mine." Unable to believe this sudden revelation, I asked William,
"That's right. I bought tickets for Mom and Dad, though. Ha ha ha."
Saying so, William sported a malicious grin. That attitude made me realize he must have deliberately not bought only my ticket.
"William, you're such a klutz."
Carol, laughing so hard she was holding her stomach, called out to William. Everyone was laughing uproariously, making me feel really sick.
"That's fine. I'll just go home,"
I said with a sigh.
Do that. A fancy hotel doesn't suit someone like you, right? It's actually for the better."
William was smiling.
"Don't go dining out alone and splurge, okay? I'll be checking the receipts afterward,"
Carol said with a laugh and a condescending tone.
"Well, now that it's settled, let's hurry and go."
Donald happily called out to William and the others, and the three of them headed to the boarding gate. How low do these people think of me? I can never forgive them. I took out my mobile phone and called someone. Then I immediately purchased a ticket on a different flight than William and his party. Surely, the three of them will regret this. At 3 p.m. that day, I received a call. My phone was on silent, so it didn't ring, but the caller was William. As I thought. I laughed maliciously and ignored the call. Actually, the flight William and his party were booked on was a morning flight. Check-in was at 3 p.m., so they probably planned to enjoy some sightseeing upon arrival. I, however, headed to the luxury hotel they were planning to stay at before them. And at the luxury hotel, I approached a certain person waiting there. "Mom. Sorry for the sudden visit." That person was my mom. I apologized to Mom as soon as I saw her.
"What on earth are you doing, Jessica? You went to all the trouble of booking this high-grade hotel. Now you're saying suddenly you can't stay?"
Mom asked, looking exasperated. Actually, I told Mom about everything that William, Donald, and Carol had done. I also mentioned how Carol had taken the dress Mom gave me. Then, visibly angry, Mom declared,
"I will never forgive them. I'll get that dress back."
Then Mom and I plotted a plan. We earnestly requested the cooperation of the manager, Stephanie. Once we had a rough plan in place, William and his party arrived at the hotel. I spotted William and discreetly hid behind the front desk. William, unaware of me, approached the check-in desk with a smile, followed by a cheerful Donald and Carol.
"We have a reservation at 3 p.m. under Smith. I don't see Jessica with you."
Stephanie responded with a puzzled look. The reservation was made under my full name. It was natural for Stephanie to say so. William, seemingly unfazed, confidently informed.
My wife couldn't make it due to sudden illness. It shouldn't be a problem, right? Someone else will come later, so there's no need to cancel the reservation.
Although I had a good idea of who the someone else might be, I remained silent, listening. Stephanie smiled broadly at William and declared,
If Jessica is absent, the reservation cannot be used. What?
William and his party froze at Stephanie's sudden announcement. Then, William repeatedly called me, probably out of confusion. Quickly regaining her composure, Carol confronted Stephanie.
What do you mean by cannot be used? Jessica made the reservation for us. And we've come all this way by plane.
Carol looked visibly confused. We came here today also as a celebration. So please, somehow, allow us. William said, trying to persuade Stephanie. Stephanie sighed as if in resignation.
If you insist, you may use it. But you'll be willing to pay the additional charges, right? Additional charges? What do you mean?
William asked Stephanie, surprised. Stephanie glanced at a woman sitting nearby. President. Maybe it's time to tell them the truth.
Right, I'll handle this. Thank you.
During the exchange between Stephanie and the woman, Carol looked puzzled.
Who is that woman? Wearing those dark sunglasses?
Carol began to say, but stopped abruptly, as she recognized the woman.
You're Jessica's mother, aren't you? Why are you here?
Carol said, looking confused. Mom and Donald and Carol had only met at family-only weddings. Mom smiled warmly in response.
It's been a while. By the way, where's my Jessica? She's not feeling well.
William continued to lie in response to Mom's question. Mom sighed at William's response.
Don't lie. I spoke to Jessica on the phone earlier and she sounded fine. Moreover, this hotel reservation was made using our company's corporate rate. If she isn't here, you'll have to pay the standard rate.
At Mom's mention of our company, William, Donald, and Carol began to show obvious signs of confusion.
What? It would be about a 70% increase. Can William and his family afford that?
Mom chuckled.
What are you talking about our company? Jessica didn't mention any corporate rate to us. And she never told me about you either.
William spoke with confusion. Clearly, the overload of information was too much for him to process. Carol also addressed Mom.
Is this a corporate rate from the company you work for? What a benefit you have even for a low-level employee. Your company must be a small one with generous welfare.
Carol's sharp remark caused Mom's brow to furrow. I had never gone into detail about Mom with William, Donald, and Carol. Since they never asked, I hadn't shared much about her. So, when Mom revealed her identity, William and the others were visibly shocked.
Me? I am the president of Kia Holdings Corporation. Jessica is, in fact, the designated future president.
Mom said this with a bright smile.
Kia Holdings Corporation? That's a major company.
Carol exclaimed loudly. Donald and William also looked shocked. Kia Holdings Corporation is one of the top travel agencies in the country. They also operate hotels and restaurants, among other businesses. In fact, this hotel falls under our group, allowing us to use it at a significantly reduced rate. Kia Holdings Corporation is a dynasty, with our family leading it for generations. And currently, Mom is the president of Kia Holdings Corporation. I know the company Jessica works for, but it's not Kia Holdings Corporation. Melissa, are you lying to us? William glared at Mom. William and I work in different companies within the same building. That's why William said such a thing to Mom. Mom laughed and explained in a humorous tone.
That company is just where she is seconded to. So, her actual affiliation is with Kia Holdings Corporation. She has completed her training and plans to return to the headquarters the year after next.
Saying so, Mom handed her business card to William. William looked at the business card and his face turned pale.
So, you really are the president of Kia Holdings Corporation?
William's body trembled slightly. Next to him, Donald and Carol also looked pale. Donald is now retired and living on a pension, but he used to work as a corporate employee. He seemed to have worked for a mid-sized company, and I heard from William that he retired as a manager. The difference in status between Donald, who retired as a mid-sized company manager, and Mom, who is the president of a major corporation, was stark. Then, Mom continued her attack.
That dress. I gave it to Jessica. Why are you wearing it? It's my special dress for important occasions.
With that, she glares at Carol.
I'm sorry. I'll take it off right now.
Carol, turning pale, hurriedly looks for a place to change. After quickly changing, she returns the dress to Mom.
If there's even a slight fray, I'll be billing you for the repairs, understand?
Yes. Carol replies meekly to Mom's declaration. Then, William, as if remembering something, murmurs,
I need to tell Lisa not to come here.
Mom doesn't react as if she hadn't heard him. However, I didn't miss his murmur. Stepping out from the front desk, I shout loudly.
Lisa won't be coming. Jessica? Why are you here? I called you several times.
William is clearly shaken. Carol is just as agitated.
Jessica, you weren't supposed to have a ticket, and now you've even took my dress.
She nearly screams. Mom quickly retorted.
The dress was Jessica's to begin with. It's not yours.
Donald is also quite flustered.
Kia Holdings Corporation, that's a bigger company than the one I worked for. And she was the president,
he says, disheartened. Prideful as he is, the revelation probably wounded his ego.
I came on a different flight. To get revenge on you all,
I say with a smile.
So, Lisa not coming is. I made sure she wouldn't come. Right after you all left on the plane this morning, I called her.
The day I found out about William's affair through his mobile phone, I discreetly visited a detective agency and requested an investigation. I obtained Lisa's contact information along with the investigation results. I had planned to talk to Lisa directly at some point, but this occasion prompted me to call her directly. After our conversation, Lisa made a decision. I calmly tell William the truth.
Lisa has decided to break up with you. After I contacted her about compensation, she apologized. I was only after William for his money. I was never serious about someone old like him.
Lisa was still in her 30s. The reason she dated William, who was 20 years older, was for his money. She was attracted to the idea of being treated to meals and receiving brand items from him. Lisa had been quite clear.
He invited me to travel with his parents, so I thought it was time to end things. I didn't want to marry William anyway.
Hearing this, William was shocked.
That's a lie, right? I was thinking of divorcing to be with Lisa.
William. Carol consoles a stunned William. Donald also shows sympathy towards William. Mom and I look on coldly at the three of them. Then, I make my final decision to William.
I'm also divorcing you, William. Now you're free to date whoever you want, not just Lisa.
At my mention of divorce, William becomes defensive.
I have no intention of divorcing. It's meaningless without Lisa. I'll never sign any divorce papers. After all, there's no conclusive evidence of infidelity.
Carol echoes William's sentiment.
That's right. We won't allow a divorce. After all, Jessica is the future president of Kia Holdings Corporation, right? We can lead an even wealthier life.
Carol's eyes gleam unnervingly. Donald also seems pleased, probably anticipating financial support from me. However, I won't let things go their way. I glare back at them.
Then, how about you look at this?
I hand over the results of the detective agency's investigation to them. The evidence clearly shows the affair. Photos and texts provide irrefutable proof. Faced with undeniable evidence, William and the others turn even paler.
They even followed us here. How?
Looking at them, I let out a laugh.
The condition for waiving Lisa's compensation was that she testify favorably about mine and William's divorce. It'll be interesting to see what she says if it goes to court.
As I laughed, William's face turned ashen. His face was filled with despair. Donald and Carol looked as if they had been thrown into the depths of hell. I had no intention of forgiving William, Donald, and Carol. I was prepared to fight them to the end, ensuring they fell into their own hell. Eventually, the divorce between me and William was finalized. William resisted until the end, but eventually caved.
I'll apologize as many times as it takes. Just please spare me from divorce. If I had known you were the future president of Kia Holdings Corporation, I would never have cheated.
He pleaded with me. But I was relentless. Mom recommended a competent lawyer, and I confronted William with evidence of his affair. William was left speechless by the evidence.
Considering how this is going, should we talk about increasing the compensation?
I suggested, turning William's face even paler.
I'm so sorry.
With that, William hastily signed the divorce papers. Despite all his resistance, it ended anticlimactically. Although I didn't demand compensation from Lisa, she ended up being fired. As it turned out, Lisa worked for a company affiliated with Kia Holdings Corporation, so Mom talked to the affiliate.
This isn't what we agreed on.
Lisa was reportedly in tears, but that was none of my concern. Lisa would likely struggle with job hunting from now on. Even after the divorce, the trouble with William continued. William, Donald, and Carol started lurking in front of my workplace building. It seems William's misconduct had been exposed to his company because of the divorce. William had been involved with several other women besides Lisa. Some had interacted with William for promotions. However, since Mom had connections with the president of William's company, she revealed all of William's actions. The president was furious and demoted William. This led to a surge of internal complaints against William. Some were even considering filing official reports. Eventually, William felt uncomfortable continuing at his job and resigned. And so he became unemployed. Donald and Carol, being retired and not working, couldn't support an unemployed William. Carol had always been a housewife, and Donald had only ever reached the level of manager before retiring. Their income wasn't high, and their pension wasn't enough. With me gone, they couldn't afford their luxuries anymore and were dissatisfied. That's why they conspired with William to ambush me at my workplace. What a hassle. I consulted the police, but they couldn't act immediately. However, a decisive moment came. One day, I ignored William and his group waiting to ambush me and tried to enter my workplace building. Then William approached and grabbed my arm.
Ouch! Let go!
But William wouldn't release his grip.
Getting cocky because we've been quiet. We're struggling without money. We'll remarry and you'll support us again,
William said, pushing a marriage consent form at me.
Just sign it. It's for our sake, so hurry up and sign.
Carol also grabbed my arm, forcing a pen into my hand.
Don't even think about running away.
Donald was there too, blocking any escape.
Enough is enough.
As I was struggling, a voice called out.
William and the rest of you, stop it right now.
It was Mom. Mom. Relief washed over me as Mom arrived to help. Mom always came to my rescue.
Security! Over here!
Mom called for the security guards.
Ah!
Donald and Carol panicked and ran off. The sight was pitiful.
Don't leave me behind!
Only William's cries echoed as he was left behind. Thus, William was caught by the security guards and handed over to the police. Marks from William's grip were left on my arm. Because of that, I decided to file a report this time. Donald and Carol may have escaped, but the police will likely contact them soon. William, Donald, and Carol have acted in a manner that will lose them social credibility. With no jobs, their future looks bleak. Since then, I have returned to the headquarters of Kia Holdings Corporation. William's whereabouts have become unknown after that incident. He seems to have fled to avoid arrest by the police. Donald and Carol returned to their house after the incident. Therefore, the police visited their house to hear their side of the story voluntarily. For my safety, I changed my workplace. Although I could have continued working at the same company, I was supposed to return the year after next anyway. Mom decided it wouldn't be a problem to return now. Since returning to the headquarters of Kia Holdings Corporation, my days have been bustling. During my secondment, I was involved in various job functions such as sales, accounting, and planning. I thought I had gained a considerable amount of experience, but the scale of the headquarters is completely different. Every single number is on a different scale, so there's a constant sense of tension. However, I have a reliable ally.
Jessica, we're going to visit our clients. You need to get your face remembered quickly.
Mom calls out to me.
I'm coming.
I hurry to follow Mom. This busyness helps me forget the painful past with William and the others. And I'm nothing but grateful to Mom, who has helped me through tough times. To repay Mom, I continue to look forward today.
She threw herself on me and I just couldn't say no. I guess I'm just that popular. But man, young women are the best. Never thought she'd get pregnant so quickly though, but hey, we're still family, right? Not like I plan on taking her away from my son. But we'll probably end up living together, so I'm looking forward to what's lying ahead.
It took a moment to understand the words of Michael, my husband, talking on the phone with a friend. I didn't know what it was about, but the pale face of our son, Paul, in front of me gave it all away.
What? You got to be kidding me. Does this mean what I think it means?
Paul muttered, without seeking confirmation from anyone. I was left speechless by his words. But we couldn't continue living without knowing the truth. After learning everything, Paul plotted his revenge. I decided to fully support him in sending Michael straight to hell. I'm Sophia. Currently 46 years old. Living with my husband Michael, our eldest son Paul, and our daughter Lily, it's the four of us. I'm currently working part-time in an administrative role at a local company. I've been working for this company since graduating high school, took a break for childbirth and raising my kids, but started working again once the kids didn't need as much attention. I have good relationships at work and a happy family life. It's a perfectly ordinary life, but I've come to feel it's the happiest thing at my age. If there's one complaint in my life, it would be about my husband, Michael. Michael is 50 this year. Unlike me, he's an active type who seeks excitement, always saying, "I'd suffocate staying at home all the time." He's always loved going out and has many hobbies. When the kids were little, he'd take them fishing, camping, hiking, and we even played golf together. Michael, always with the family, seemed like the ideal dad from the outside, and was even envied by others. But what's seen from the outside isn't everything. While curious, Michael also gets bored very easily. He's the type who starts by looking the part at anything he does. Expensive fishing rods, camping gear, golf equipment. Every new hobby meant spending hundreds of dollars on gear, only to stop using them after a few times. And they would never be used again.
Dad, I want to go fishing again. Dad, I want to go camping.
Even if the kids begged, once he got bored, he wouldn't listen to their requests.
What? I'm already done with that stuff.
With those words, it was over. He might have seemed like a good dad to others, but Michael was just doing what he wanted. The kids were not really joining him. He was dragging all of us along. Eventually, the kids realized that too.
All right, this summer vacation, let's all go get our diving license.
Eventually, when Michael would suggest something, no thanks. You'll just quit when it gets fun.
And getting gear for all four of us costs money, especially when we'll just stop using it soon anyway.
That's why we stopped going along with his suggestions. I think the kids have a point. I feel the same way. But Michael just gets mad at them. What's the deal?
I thought it'd be nice for us all to do something together.
He complains in such a way that you can't tell who's supposed to be the adult. When Lily, our youngest, became a middle schooler, Michael truly stopped getting any attention from the kids. But that didn't mean Michael calmed down. What he started next was gambling. Compared to his past hobbies, starting gambling didn't require much upfront money. And he'd probably get bored of it soon anyway. If he went alone on his days off without dragging the kids along, I actually found it convenient. I didn't know how long this new hobby would last, but I decided to just watch over it.
Sophia, listen, I won $1,000 today. Aren't I amazing?
Luckily, Michael never suffered major losses. Sometimes he'd win $1,000, other times $300, or even $50. The amounts varied, but it seemed he mostly won.
$1,000? That's incredible. Makes working feel stupid, right?
He'd joke about his hobby like that. But after getting hooked on gambling for about 6 months, Michael stopped talking about winning. Lately, I haven't heard about any wins. Not going well? If I asked, he'd brag, of course not. I'm a genius. I keep winning every time I go. It's just a hassle to report it. Plus, it's my pocket money. Well, I had my concerns, but he was serious about his job. As long as he was using his own spending money and kept it within reason, there wasn't much I could say. It's not like I wasn't worried, but nothing has lasted a year with him. I thought he'd get bored soon enough. However, contrary to my expectations, Michael didn't stop gambling. He even made friends, continuing to indulge in gambling every weekend a year later. As I was growing frustrated with such Michael, one day, something happened while I was shopping at the supermarket. When I tried to pay with the card for our living expenses, the clerk told me, "I'm sorry, but the payment isn't going through." Thinking the magnetic strip was damaged, I quickly pulled out my own card. "Sorry, can we use this one instead?" And paid without issue. The card for living expenses was a family card issued in Michael's name, with withdrawals from his account. So, I had to talk to him about it that night.
The card didn't work at the supermarket today. Maybe the magnetic strip's bad? Can you handle the reissuing?
I handed the card to Michael. But days passed without any action from Michael. Suspecting something, I called the company, but they said they couldn't discuss it with anyone but Michael. While waiting for the reissue using my own card, I noticed a letter from the card company. Thinking Michael had taken care of it without telling me, I opened it, assuming it was the new card, without checking with Michael. But the contents of the letter shocked me.
Couldn't withdraw from the account? What does that mean?
It was a demand letter asking for a deposit into the account. The account was where Michael's salary was supposed to go. It was unthinkable that there wouldn't be enough for a withdrawal. I rushed to the bank to check the balance. To my horror, there was only $300 left. There were multiple withdrawals from the ATM using the card. No doubt about it. It was Michael's doing. Suppressing the rage that threatened to overwhelm me, I returned home. And that day, when Michael came home, I confronted him right away.
What were you thinking? What's this all of a sudden? Don't play dumb. There's hardly any balance left. How are we supposed to get by this month?
Michael laughed it off as if to dodge the question. Just lost a bit, so I borrowed some. It's not like I touched the savings, so it shouldn't matter much, right? And he had the nerve to say it so nonchalantly. I was furious with Michael's carefree attitude. It wasn't that the card was demagnetized. It was just disabled, which is why it couldn't be used. Michael knew that, so he didn't bother to get it reissued. Even if he had told me honestly, it wouldn't have been forgivable, but keeping silent and then trying to cover it up made me feel betrayed. Please, no more gambling. Saying that seemed to sour Michael's mood even further.
What's the big deal? I've been losing a bit these past few months, but overall, I'm still ahead, aren't I?
Quit while you're ahead then. He responded with a sullen face and childish retort, and I scolded him again. After that, Michael was unbearable.
What a boring family. Can't even do what I enjoy.
Muttering that, he treated me, who had banned gambling, like an enemy. But I couldn't just sit around and wait until the financial issues affected our lives. The kids were still students. Their education costs money. The relationship between us spouses deteriorated, and Michael probably got bored with our marriage, but divorce wasn't an easy option. Wanting to maintain a harmonious family until the kids were grown, I spent my days trying to appease Michael. Then a happy event occurred in our family. Paul, who had graduated high school and was working, got a girlfriend and introduced her to me. Her name is Mia. She's the same age as Paul, moved from the countryside to work here, and met him through a friend at work. It felt like a fresh breeze had blown into our family, and I welcomed Mia warmly. "Your mom's cooking is so delicious." Mia was a lovely girl. She always complimented our meals when we ate together. She even went cafe hopping with Lily, quickly becoming part of our family. Mia also took great care of Michael, being his drinking buddy and listening to his stories, something only she did among us. Michael liked Mia too, saying, if Paul and Mia got married and she became my daughter-in-law, that'd be great. Of course, I was all for the idea. Paul and Mia were still 20 but seemed to be thinking seriously about their future. Later, they decided to marry when they turned 23.
Why wait until 23?
I was simply curious. Paul explained, "Getting married costs money. I want to give Mia the wedding she dreams of, so we thought we'd save up together until then." I was impressed by his mature thoughts for someone his age. Of course, we had enough savings to afford a wedding for them. But Paul didn't want to rely on us. Instead, he wanted to be the one to support us. I was moved to tears by his sentiment, even though the wedding was still far off. As a sign that Mia had already become part of our family, we decided to refer to her not just as Paul's girlfriend but as his fiancée. However, some time later, Paul told us that Mia was pregnant. I was surprised by the sudden news, especially since they had planned to marry at 23.
Pregnant? I don't mind, considering what you two feel,
I said to Paul, but his expression remained clouded.
Is something wrong? It's just... Mia shouldn't be pregnant.
Paul muttered uncomfortably in response to my question. I was puzzled by his statement. Paul added, as if to drive the point home,
There's no way I could be the father. I was away on a business trip when she would have gotten pregnant.
Paul's anguished cry pierced my heart. Mia had an affair? But she didn't seem like that kind of person. Paul continued,
But Mia insists she hasn't cheated. I just don't know what to do.
Paul was in despair. Seeing Paul like this, I wanted to talk to Mia and asked Paul if he could arrange a conversation for us. I decided to keep Michael in the dark until things were clearer. Given the delicate nature of the issue, I doubted Michael's involvement would help. But the truth came out in an unexpected way. One evening, Michael was unusually late to dinner. "Paul, can you call Dad?" I was busy and asked Paul to fetch Michael. Paul went to call him, but neither returned for a while.
What's going on?
Leaving Lily to finish dinner preparations, I headed to the bedroom. There, I found Paul standing outside the bedroom, pale as a ghost. What happened? Paul gestured for silence, placing his finger over his lips, and as I approached the bedroom door, I could hear Michael's voice.
Well, this secures our future.
He seemed to be on the phone. Michael's phone conversation was likely with one of the dubious friends he'd met through gambling. I looked at Paul's face. If it was just a phone call, he could have simply come back and said, Dad was on the phone. But judging by his complexion, it was probably not just any call. That became clear with his next words.
She threw herself on me, and I just couldn't say no. I guess I'm just that popular. But man, young women are the best. Never thought she'd get pregnant so quickly though, but hey, we're still family, right? Not like I plan on taking her away from my son. But we'll probably end up living together, so I'm looking forward to what's lying ahead.
At first, I didn't understand, but Paul's pale face made me realize the gravity of the situation.
What? You got to be kidding me. Does this mean what I think it means?
Paul muttered, not seeking confirmation from anyone. I was left speechless by his words. Afterward, I took Paul and left the house. I couldn't let Michael and Paul meet. Lily looked puzzled, but I asked her to eat with Michael, and we went straight to Mia's place. Paul. Mom. Mia greeted us with a worried face. It seemed the pregnancy had caused a conflict between them. Feeling the tense atmosphere, I spoke up. Mia, I want to hear the truth. Who is the father of the child in your stomach? Then Mia started to cry. She seemed hesitant, but after I promised I won't get mad, no matter what, she slowly began to talk. Actually, it's Paul's dad. Despite my promise not to get angry, I felt a deep rage upon hearing who was involved. On one hand, I couldn't believe what my husband had done, and on the other, how Mia had agreed to it. But I was wrong. I heard Paul is infertile. And if we are going to have children, he would want someone who's related by blood. So Paul's dad suggested that he should be the father, since it wouldn't change the fact that we're family. Both Paul and I were speechless upon hearing this. Of course, that was not true about Paul. Mia just kept crying. What a vile turn of events. Michael had seduced Mia, Paul's fiancée, under false pretenses. Mia was the primary victim in this situation. Any distrust I had towards Mia vanished immediately. It was clear she wasn't lying.
Because it's a delicate issue, we thought to keep it from Paul. Michael and I thought staying silent would keep everyone happy.
Hearing this, my anger towards Michael nearly exploded. Paul must have felt the same.
Unforgivable. That man alone, I will definitely send him down to hell.
I nodded in agreement with Paul's words and decided to fully support his plan to bring Michael down. But caring for Mia was our first priority. Both Paul and I apologized deeply to her. She told us not to worry about it, but this wasn't something an apology could fix. I think there's no fault in the child. But please, give me some time to think about what to do. Mia told us her thoughts. Of course, we respected her wishes and asked her to contact us immediately if she needed anything. With that, we left her place.
We're home.
Ah, you're late. Where were you?
Lily and I already ate.
When Paul and I returned home, Michael casually remarked as if nothing was wrong. Paul looked like he might attack Michael at any moment, but he restrained himself and put on a smile.
Just wanted to have a chat with Mom, you know. I felt sorry for you, being banned from gambling and all.
Paul said this with a smile as he approached Michael. Right? You understand, Paul? Can't live without a hobby. Well, I guess you're right. Paul got me thinking, and I've reconsidered. Just don't overspend, okay? Lily was the only one not in on our plan, so her indignation, what? Are you stupid? Only encouraged Michael further. If the whole family suggested it, he'd surely be suspicious.
Well, it's 3 against 1. Give it up, Lily. Finally, gambling is back on.
As expected, Michael was overjoyed and headed out to gamble the very next day. During his absence, we explained everything to Lily. Predictably, Lily showed more disgust towards Michael than anyone.
Unbelievable! I can't stand that he's our dad. Mia deserves so much better,
Lily said, crying. And from that day on, Lily joined the plan. The plan was simple. Just let Michael squander his money on gambling. Our family knows Michael's character better than anyone. He would surely start dipping into the living expenses quietly again. That's why I moved all the living expenses and savings to a different account. I thought it would take about 2 months before moving to the next phase of our plan, but Michael's spending was several times faster than expected. In just 3 weeks, he ran out of money and started tapping into the living expenses account, which quickly ran dry too.
What are you thinking? This is the second time, you know? With Lily's college fees coming up, what are you going to do?
I yelled at Michael. Michael pleaded desperately, I didn't think it would run out so quickly. I'll win it back soon, just lend me $200, no, $100 from the savings. Even though I anticipated this, my anger towards Michael, who had quickly spent all the money, was genuine, not just an act.
You haven't learned your lesson at all. What are you even thinking?
Tears of frustration and anger came to me, and even Michael seemed taken aback. Always thinking about yourself. I thought I could endure it until the kids were grown, but I can't take it anymore. I slammed the divorce papers down. Michael turned pale at the sight of them.
Aren't you overreacting? I was just kidding.
He tried to soothe me, but I had no sympathy for Michael.
Lily will be under my custody. This house is in your name, so I'll be leaving. Just calm down. It's just gambling. Just gambling? That's just the last straw. I despise everything about you.
Michael seemed truly remorseful this time. But that level of remorse was far from sufficient. The divorce between me and Michael was just the first step of our plan. Michael was stubborn to the end, but to that, Paul said,
Dad, you said we were a boring family that wouldn't let you do what you wanted, remember?
Now you can do whatever you want. You're free.
That's true, I guess.
Tricked by Paul's encouragement, Michael signed the divorce papers. Upon learning about the separate account for living expenses during the property division, Michael was furious, but I had only safeguarded our money. He had no reason to be angry.
That money will also be split in half in the distribution of property,
he said arrogantly.
You're getting the house. If that's the case, sell the house, and we'll split that money too. Of course, I'm going to sell all the fishing rods, camping equipment, and anything else that might be worth something. But it's only natural, isn't?
Michael was at a loss for words. He didn't want to sell the house and, despite having no plans to use them, didn't want to part with his fishing rods either. In the end, I was able to receive all the savings. With that money, Lily and I started living in an apartment. I'm an adult, so I'll stay here, Paul said, seemingly content, but that was just for show. He stayed in the house to report to us how Michael was progressively falling into ruin. Michael's descent into hell was slow, like descending a staircase. Whether it was the stress of the divorce or the freedom of no one nagging him about gambling, he began visiting the gambling dens daily. It had been only on weekends before, but now, losing and coming home after work became his routine. Hey Dad, welcome back. Paul would greet him as if nothing was amiss. I'm home.
What am I having for dinner?
Nothing.
I just got back too. What are you eating then?
This?
It's the stew Mom made.
Paul would flaunt the food I prepared for him right in front of Michael, who ended up eating instant noodles. Michael's envious gaze at Paul's food.
Give me a bite.
After a while, Michael would always say this, and Paul would refuse with, no way. This exchange continued daily. Then, about a month later, while eating instant noodles, Michael asked Paul, Paul, I'm sorry to ask,
but could you chip in for the house expenses? What? You know, utilities and stuff cost money.
Michael seemed solemn, but Paul quickly caught on.
Ran out of money, haven't you?
No, it's not like that. Michael avoided eye contact as he spoke. Paul stood up, looking exasperated.
I've been contributing monthly. You've used that up too, haven't you? What? I can't give any more money. If you're still asking for money, then I'll leave.
Indeed, Paul had been contributing financially since he started working. Even after we left, he continued to deposit money into the living expenses account. Right, I was wrong. You can stay. Michael desperately tried to keep Paul from leaving. But Paul laughed and said,
But you know, I used to contribute because Mom did all the housework. Now that I think about it, you don't do anything, and I'm the one doing all the housework, right? So, it's only natural for you to cover the utility bills, and I shouldn't have to contribute at all, should I?
At those words, Michael had nothing to say. The house remained clean thanks to Paul. It must be difficult for him to even look at Michael, the person he despises the most. I admire Paul's determination to decisively push Michael further down.
Yeah, you're right.
Michael nodded, flustered, but Paul added,
Well, I'm leaving anyway.
Paul played Michael perfectly, inflicting sure damage while leaving him disoriented. Michael tried to stop him, but Paul shrugged him off and left him behind. What followed was predictable. Neighbors, unaware that I had left, began to contact me frequently.
The house looks neglected. Are you away? Michael seems really worn down. Is everything all right?
From the messages, I could easily imagine the kind of life Michael was leading. Furthermore, there were reports of scary people are visiting. Should I call the police? I seriously wondered what was going on, but it seems he has borrowed money from a loan shark. That means he really must have no money left. As expected, I received a call from Michael.
Sophia, help me. You're the only one I can turn to now.
The only thing Michael was capable of doing was begging for money. I had no intention of helping such a person, but I decided to get in touch. I have something to discuss with you. I'll come to the house tomorrow. Michael responded, I'll be waiting, to my message. The next day, I headed to the house. With Paul, Lily, Mia, and a man. 5 of us went to the house.
Oh, everyone came along. I've been waiting.
When we rang the doorbell, Michael greeted us with an unsettlingly wide smile. However, his smile vanished upon seeing the man. May I ask who you are? The man introduced himself. Nice to meet you. I'm Smith, a lawyer. I'm here to discuss the damages they've all suffered.
Damages?
Yes. The infidelity against Sophia, defamation of Paul, and sexual assault against Mia.
What?
Hearing these words, Michael let out a strange noise and turned pale, breaking out in a cold sweat. Let's talk inside. Actually, something urgent came up. I'm sorry, but I have to ask you guys to leave now. Noticing our gaze, Michael seemed to finally grasp the situation. In the next moment, he tried to flee.
Don't run!
Paul caught him and said,
I know everything you did. Act like an adult and take responsibility.
Subdued by Paul, Michael shrank back. Then it was the lawyer's turn. Michael, unable to argue against Smith's words, just nodded, watched by us with disdain. It goes without saying for Mia. Claiming Paul is infertile and telling his fiancé is defamation that could ruin her life. Please reflect on your actions. We then collectively demanded $100,000 in compensation. Smith explained to Michael the breakdown and its amount.
I can't possibly pay that.
Michael pleaded to Smith and the others. That's when Lily said,
Can't you cover that by selling this house? We're going to make sure you pay.
Michael has no money left. He's even resorted to borrowing. Selling the house seemed his only option. Michael's wailing and apologies were repulsive. But forgiveness was out of the question. Disgusting. Lily looked at Michael with disdain, as if looking at trash, and Paul also showed his disgust.
Just pay up. And don't ever come near us again. If you can't do that, we're prepared to take legal action over what happened to Mia.
We left Michael crying alone in the cluttered, filthy house and went home. Eventually, Michael sold the house. He used the money to pay us and to repay the loan shark, as Smith informed us. But now he had no home and no money to rent an apartment. No one was willing to help him. Not even his gambling friends seemed close enough to lend a hand. He's been living in an internet cafe, subsisting on his advance salary from work. How long can such a life last? It seems like he might end up homeless if this continues. We thought Paul's plan had brought Michael down, but on reflection, Michael seemed to have brought himself down. He will likely fade away, forgotten by our family, and end his life alone and unnoticed. Mia and Paul got married.
The child is innocent. I can't let Mia suffer anymore,
Paul declared, accepting Mia's child as his own. The amount of internal struggle he must have faced to make that decision. Mia, Lily, and I all cried, but Paul was the only one smiling. Mia gave birth to a healthy girl. Doesn't she look like Mom? Lily was the first to say so, seeing the resemblance to me. And Paul looks like me. If the baby looks like me then, and so we had a DNA test and it revealed the child was indeed Paul's. It seemed there had been a mix-up with the due dates. Mia, Lily, and I cried. But Paul, who had been holding back, cried the most.
I'll make sure they're happy. Both Mia and this child.
Paul made that promise. His next plan was truly wonderful. And I intend to support it fully.
Risa, while you were away, I moved my parents' stuff into our house. What? What do you mean by that?
While I was on a trip, my husband Paulie had moved his parents' moving boxes into our house without asking. And on top of that, I received unbelievable treatment from Paulie. You should not come back anymore. Paulie doesn't want me to come back home anymore. Even though this house is where our family has always lived, Paulie wants to kick me out and live with his parents. However, I had anticipated being kicked out by Paulie and easily retorted, "Okay. I'll move out on my own." I sought advice from my dad, Mike, and took a certain action. First, I sent an email to someone and made a plan. I returned to America with Mike. And then, I came back to our house. I started to execute the plan as intended. Paulie, who had been naively thinking he could live with his parents, was surprised by the unexpected turn of events. Actually, the plan I had made with Mike was, my name is Risa. I am a 45-year-old dietitian working in a hospital. Originally, I was supposed to follow in Mike's footsteps, but inheriting my mom's love for cooking, I became a dietitian. However, my beloved mom passed away before I graduated from college. After that, Mike started working in France, so we sold the house I was born and raised in, and I started living alone in an apartment. Being plain-looking since childhood, I've always been inconspicuous wherever I go. Moreover, attending girls' schools from middle school to university, I had no encounters with men, and I had never had a boyfriend. However, I was fortunate to meet good people wherever I went, and after graduating from college, I got married. At that friend's wedding, I met my current husband, Paulie, who was 3 years older than me and a friend of the groom. He seemed like the type who would be popular with the ladies. Luckily, or perhaps coincidentally, he had just broken up with his girlfriend. His ex-girlfriend was a nurse, and it seems they broke up due to misaligned schedules and night shifts. When I mentioned that I was a dietitian with early mornings and few holidays, he was very pleased. However, at that time, I was busy studying for the national exam for registered dietitians, so I was busy on weekends. Even so, he was kind enough to send me messages, saying, "I miss not being able to see you, but good luck with your studies." Feeling a sense of destiny with him, I thought I'd like to marry him if I passed. And on the day of the exam results, he invited me out to celebrate my passing that night.
Congratulations on passing.
This is how I feel. Would you accept it? What he handed me was an engagement ring. He proposed to me right then and there. Overjoyed as if my passing was his own, I tearfully said yes right away. And so, our married life began. At first, we thought about living in an apartment, but with Mike's help, we bought our own home. I was looking forward to a happy life from now on, but after getting married, I started to feel a sense of discomfort around Polly. Thinking it was because I had no experience with men, I assumed it would be okay once I got used to it. However, one day, when Polly was looking at my pay stub, he made a comment that made me do a double take. "What's this?" I thought dietitians, being professionals, would earn more. "I'm disappointed." "What?" "Well, I just started working, and we're both working, so an income of around $200,000 should be fine, right?" I retorted, feeling somewhat offended. It's not like I got married to be supported by my husband, but being told my salary was low didn't feel good. Yet, Polly went on to insult my earnings further. I've been totally deceived. If I knew the income was this low, I would have asked before getting married. A nurse would have earned more. Polly must have been talking about his ex-girlfriend. It's one thing to complain about my earnings, but comparing me to his ex-girlfriend is unforgivable. Indeed, nurses receive night shift allowances and holiday pay. In comparison, my salary is lower because I have fewer early mornings and holiday shifts. However, I have my own side of the story to tell. I happened to see Polly's pay stub the other day, and it turns out he earns even less than I do. Yet, I thought we wouldn't struggle with our combined incomes, so I didn't say anything. I tried to gently break it to Polly, not wanting to hurt his pride. "Well, it seems like you have it tough too, so I guess you were hoping for a bit more from my salary. Sorry for not meeting your expectations." "That's right. I work for a small company, and my salary is really low, so I wanted to marry a professional woman to achieve financial stability." I only meant to cheer him up with what I didn't even believe myself, but I never thought Polly would take it seriously. Before we got married, he was happy that my work hours were regular, but after we got married, he complained about my low income as if he had changed his stance. What kind of world does a man live in where he expects his wife's income to be higher than his? I was just dumbfounded by Polly's unreliable behavior. As soon as he knew about my income, Polly started looking down on me. Yet, he wouldn't hesitate to buy whatever he wanted without restraint. Even when I asked him to be a bit more frugal, he wouldn't listen at all. "I've been spoiled by my parents since I was a kid, buying me whatever I wanted, so I can't change my attitude towards money that easily." I couldn't say anything back to such a spoiled statement from Polly. It's no excuse to say that he was spoiled by his parents when he was a child at his age. The following year after we got married, we were blessed with a boy. I hoped that becoming a parent would change Polly, but his habit of spending recklessly didn't improve, even during childcare. It was always the same with him spending his entire salary. If it wasn't enough, he'd sneak money from my wallet without me noticing. While I was struggling to manage work and budgeting while raising our son, Cedric, Polly hardly contributed to childcare. As time passed, struggling through these tough days, Cedric is now preparing for his college entrance exams this year. Thanks to my careful budgeting, it looks like we can afford to send him to college. Cedric, understanding our financial situation, has been studying hard to enter a national university. Yet, Polly came up with a ridiculous idea. Because I bought a new car last year, the loan repayments are tough. Plus, there's Cedric's exams, right? So, I've decided to sell my parents' house and have them move in with us.
Wait, what are you saying? Suddenly living together like that, it's going to be a problem.
Why? Risa, you get along with my parents, right? If we live together, we'll get their pension and become wealthier. Indeed, I don't hate the idea of living with my in-laws. It's just that I didn't like Polly's way of making decisions on his own. In terms of finances, we've been managing wealth so far, so there shouldn't be a problem as long as we don't indulge in luxuries.
Why do you always decide everything selfishly? Even the new car, you bought it without consulting me. That's my car, so I don't need to consult you every time.
Seeing Polly's selfish behavior, this time, Cedric got furious.
Dad, enough is enough. When I go to college, I might come home late from part-time jobs or clubs. If grandparents Arnold and Rothy are living with us, it's going to be awkward, right? Why don't you discuss these things properly with Mom?
Cedric, coming out of his room all of a sudden and raising his voice, left Polly wide-eyed in surprise. But the next moment, Polly turned to me, lashing out as if he was taking it out on me.
Cedric talking back to me, his dad, like that is because of your poor parenting. Reflect on it.
Saying that, Polly locked himself in his room and didn't come out for a while. I was happy that Cedric stood up for me. However, I was worried that the current home environment would affect his exam preparations. Despite my worries, Cedric successfully passed his first-choice national university. But tired of living with Polly, Cedric decided to move out and start living on his own. He said he wants to try his best on his own without relying on his parents, even if it means working part-time. Even so, Polly continues to ignore both me and Cedric. Ever since it's been just Polly and me at home, we don't even talk though we're in the same house. It feels suffocating. During these days, feeling mentally drained, I called my dad Mike in France to seek advice. Mike, worried about me, suggested I come to France for a while. I thought I couldn't take a long break because of my job, but it seems my colleagues were worried about my pale complexion recently. After explaining the situation, I was allowed to take some time off. However, I wanted to keep my consultation with Mike a secret from Polly. So, I told him I was invited on a trip by a friend. I hoped that if I was away for a while, Polly might cool down a bit. But heading to Mike's, an entirely unexpected situation unfolded. Starting with a call from Polly while I was in France. Risa, I've moved my parents' stuff into our house while you were away.
What? What do you mean?
What do you mean, what? I've been saying, haven't I? That I'd live with my parents. More than that, Dad and Mom are angry with you. They said a wife who spoils their son like you is the worst. No way. I couldn't believe what Polly was saying. My in-laws shouldn't be the type to speak ill of me like that. So, I've decided we'll live with my parents and me from now on. If you were here, it'd inconvenience my parents. After all, you're the strict wife who makes their son speak ill of them. Polly must have badmouthed me to my in-laws. Maybe the part about them being angry with me was also a fabrication. Angry, I thought about shouting something back. But, to stay calm, I just said, "I'll call you back later," and hung up. Luckily, Mike was home, so I immediately shared the phone call's content with him. Mike, looking disgruntled, shook his head. Polly, really? Relying on his parents at his age. That's what I'm saying. I don't understand why I have to be the one kicked out. After a long discussion, Mike came up with a suggestion that excited me. I thought this would teach Polly a lesson. First, I contacted someone by email, then called Polly's mobile phone. Polly, talking over the phone won't cut it, so let's discuss this when I get back from my trip. I said this calmly, but Polly, with a laugh in his voice, replied, "You shouldn't come back." Just as Mike advised, Polly didn't want me to return home. Expecting this, I retorted easily, "Okay, got it. I'll just move out on my own." Huh? Polly sounded taken aback by my unexpected response. But thinking I was just bluffing, he laughed and replied, "Move out? Where to, when you have nowhere to go?" "Oh, to the place I'm currently at." "What are you talking about? You're on a trip with friends. Wait, you're not with a man, are you?" Now he seemed to misunderstand that I was with a lover, so I decided to reveal the truth. "Well, if it's a man, it's indeed a man. But, you know, it's Dad." Mike's place." Polly sounded relieved. But he'd be surprised by the next part of the conversation. "Dad's living in a mansion in France now, so I've decided to live here too. That's why we're going to sell the house we've been living in." "What? What do you mean?" "Well, you should know, right? That house is in Dad's name, built for us. If I'm not living there, it's to be sold." "What? But Dad and Mom are here right now. What are you going to do?" That's what I said. It's no use talking over the phone. Polly, finally grasping the situation, hung up without saying anything else. He can't possibly imagine the further tragedy waiting for him upon my return to America. A week later, I returned home with Mike, where Polly was living with my in-laws. At the entrance, my in-laws greeted us with smiles. "Mike, it's been a long time." "Yes, I can't often return to America due to work. Risa has always been under your care." While Mike and my father-in-law Arnold were exchanging greetings, Polly quietly emerged. It seemed he hadn't yet informed them about the house sale. Looking awkward, Polly just bowed his head. "Polly, the movers are coming today to pick up the stuff. Have you prepared everything?" "All your stuff is already packed." "Oh, it's not just my things that are being moved out." "Huh? Do I have to move my things out today, too?" Polly's surprised shout caught Arnold's attention. "What's going on, Polly? Why are your things being moved out?" Polly, looking guilty, hesitantly explained the situation. Arnold became furious and started yelling at Polly. "You said this house was bought under your name with a loan so we could live together. Making your parents ashamed, unforgivable." Arnold's thunderous voice left Polly speechless. Then, the moving truck arrived. After my things were moved out, my mother-in-law Rothy came out to direct the movers. "Thank you for your hard work. Our stuff is prepared here, please take it." Rothy had neatly prepared all the household items, including Polly's. Seeing this, Polly was dumbfounded. "Mom? What's happening? Why are you packing Dad's stuff too? Where are you planning to take it?" Watching Polly panic and question Rothy, we all burst into laughter. "You've been completely fooled." "What? What's going on? Why is everyone laughing all of a sudden?" Indeed, this was all a plan to trick Polly, discussed in advance by everyone here. The first person I contacted by email from France was Rothy. Rothy had been worried about my tired appearance for some time. After repeatedly asking why, I ended up telling Rothy everything about Polly. Rothy was shocked, especially at the part where Polly blamed his extravagant habits on his parents spoiling him. Rothy tearfully apologized for her parenting in front of me, which made me feel guilty. But Polly's wasteful spending wasn't Rothy's fault. As I comforted Rothy, our bond deepened. For me, without a mom, Rothy became someone I could consult about anything. Mike was aware of my close relationship with Rothy. Thus, he suggested involving the in-laws in our plan. Rothy, without letting Polly know, had been looking for a new place for them to live with Arnold. Arnold's scolding of Polly was all an act. I nearly burst out laughing at their convincing performance.
Rothy, thank you for arranging the movers for me as well. Now, I can move to the house Dad built in France.
I'm sorry, Risa. My son has caused you so much trouble. Rothy, we agreed not to say that, didn't we? Rothy and I laughed together. Polly, unaware of how close I was with his parents, looked surprised. Mom, where are we moving to? We've already sold our family home. We've already arranged a new place for us. Polly seemed relieved at Rothy's words. But that relief would soon be short-lived.
So, it was like that. I worried for nothing. Then I'll just go there too, right?
What are you talking about?
That's a senior living apartment for Arnold to live in with someone else.
Polly, you're not a child anymore. Find your own place to live. As soon as Rothy said this, Polly's face turned pale.
That's impossible! I don't even have the money for moving, let alone find a new place.
Indeed, Polly had squandered his salary on hobbies and entertainment, leaving him with no savings. No matter how he struggled now, it was his own responsibility. Desperate, Polly looked at me with pleading eyes. I could guess what he was about to say.
By the way, Mike built quite a big house in France, right? I had no idea you were such a well-off lady. Listen, I'll do anything you say from now on, so could you take me with you to that house?
Suddenly speaking in a sweet tone, he was indeed trying to rely on me. I had no intention of indulging such naive thoughts and firmly stated my position.
I've been fooled by your kind words on occasion, but I can't forgive you anymore. You've barely contributed to our living expenses and have just been playing around. I don't want to be your wife anymore. I've already discussed this with Cedric on the phone yesterday, and we've decided to get a divorce. Cedric agrees it's for the best.
I vented the feelings I had been holding back, feeling a sense of relief. My in-laws seemed to agree, nodding deeply.
What am I supposed to do now?
Polly cried, tears in his eyes, but my decision was firm. I presented him with the divorce papers and demanded his signature. Yet, Polly stubbornly refused to sign. Seeing this, Arnold showed his anger again.
Polly, enough is enough. After all the trouble you've caused Risa, now you're thinking of relying on her parents' home. I'm ashamed to call you my son.
That's right. I admit, I've spoiled you too much. But Polly, you're an adult now. Stop being so selfish and start living on your own. Convinced by his parents' earnest persuasion, Polly shed tears.
What? Even Dad and Mom? Do I have no allies here?
Muttering so, Polly signed the divorce papers. He then arranged to store his belongings in a storage unit and left the house alone. Betrayed by the parents he thought were on his side, he was visibly shocked. However, the in-laws had decided to cut ties with Polly. Not just them. I also promised never to let Polly see Cedric again. This was a strong request from Cedric. He had always resented Polly for never acting like a father. With the divorce as an opportunity, Cedric wanted to sever ties with Polly. I thought it was for the best for Cedric. Rejected by his parents and disowned by his son, Polly must have lost the will to live. Having lost everything, Polly spent some time living in monthly rental hotels and internet cafes. But once he received his salary, he managed to move into an apartment where he could live alone. During the divorce, I gave Polly a small amount of money as part of our shared assets. It was practically nothing, but I wanted to avoid any future claims for money, given my financial situation. In essence, it was severance pay. However, once Polly had a bit of financial leeway, he started getting into partying. Why do I know this? Because Polly contacted me, saying, "I'll find a woman with a good income and make you regret leaving me." Initially, after becoming alone, Polly would contact me just to express his loneliness. But once he had money, his attitude became arrogant again. After some time, the communications from Polly suddenly stopped. I wondered if he had found a new girlfriend, but it turned out the situation was far more serious. According to the former in-laws, Polly had fallen for a nurse he met at a party. Despite not being reciprocated, Polly persistently pursued her. At worst, he even showed up at her apartment. As a result of his relentless stalking, he was reported and arrested in the act. The former in-laws, having intended to sever parental ties, were troubled by their son's scandal, feeling deeply sorry for them. Being a parent is tough. No matter how much you try to distance yourself, you're still responsible when something happens. Despite causing so much trouble for his parents, Polly seemed unrepentant. During the interrogation,
"It was true love,"
he kept insisting. This led to a judgment that he was not remorseful, and his release was delayed. Such a man is better off cooling his head in prison for a while. After all, a penniless man in his 50s chasing such ideals will only cause annoyance. Now, I live elegantly in a mansion in France with Mike. Still not accustomed to the environment and not fluent in French, I'm not working yet. However, I can't stay unemployed forever, so I'm attending French lessons. Once I'm proficient in the language, I plan to help out with Mike's company. As time passed, Cedric graduated from university. He then moved here to work at Mike's company. In fact, Mike had called him over with the intention of making Cedric his successor. It was lonely being apart from Cedric for 4 years, but now we can live together forever. This thought fills me with joy. Now that I've become quite fluent in French, I assist with Mike's company and work as a cooking class instructor locally. Though my marriage failed, my life in France is very fulfilling. Despite being in my mid-40s, this is an ideal environment to enjoy life. I've decided to forget my past self, who worried about being plain and unpopular, and live positively. After all, there's still so much more to come. Surely, Mom in heaven is watching over me.
Kids are really at a disadvantage when their parents have low-paying jobs, aren't they?
Sandra, a mother of one of my son's teammates, always seemed to harbor an intense hostility towards me. To be honest, I never really liked her. One day, I was invited by her for lunch. Sensing something unpleasant, I decided to take the initiative. "Do you know about my father?" Days later, I showed up at the lunch hosted by Sandra in a luxury car, and her attitude completely changed. I'm Ashley, a 32-year-old office worker. I met my husband George through work. We hit it off and started dating. We're a close-knit family of 3, blessed with our son. He is Noah, 5 years old now. As he grew, he joined a local baseball team, and I found myself constantly busy with work and social commitments. To be honest, I've never been keen on mingling with the other moms from the team, but supporting my son's baseball games naturally led to more interactions. Among these new acquaintances was Sandra. Her child and Noah were good friends, so I tried to get along with her. But Sandra was a bit of a handful. She always dressed in high-end brands, and all she talked about was how elite her husband was. Because of that, she was somewhat ostracized by others. Still, being on the same team meant I couldn't just ignore her. Plus, our sons were friends, so I tried to accept her like everyone else did. One day, as usual, I was at a tea party hosted by Sandra. Calling it a tea party might be a stretch since it was really just a session to listen to her boast. It was never enjoyable. Sandra was usually the one doing all the talking, but that day she was strangely cheerful and even seemed interested in what others had to say. The friends around us were engaging in lively conversations, but I was suspicious. Wondering what was going on, Sandra suddenly gave me a sly smile and turned the conversation to me.
By the way, your husband is George, right? My husband said he saw him at a subsidiary the other day. Is that true?
As I looked puzzled by her question, her smile deepened, and she looked at me as if she was sizing me up.
I can't believe your husband works at a subsidiary. Is there a problem?
My husband works hard and is up for promotion, I countered.
You know, you're always at our tea parties, right? I thought maybe it was taking a toll on your finances. Subsidiary jobs don't pay that well, I guess.
She looked at me with pity, and I couldn't help but feel annoyed. I confidently responded that I worked too and were not struggling. But she just laughed at my reply.
Both spouses working is a sign of poverty, you know. It's sad, having to work because your husband doesn't earn enough.
Her attitude was clearly mocking. I tried to explain that I work because I enjoy it, but she seemed to take it as me being defensive. She continued to insinuate that working couples are poor and that I must struggle to afford luxury brands. As I observed her, it dawned on me why she was in such a good mood. She had probably found something to ridicule me about today. I was genuinely upset. Whatever I said to her was dismissed as bravado, leaving me no room for a comeback. I couldn't understand why she suddenly treated me like an enemy. That day ended unresolved. Later, I was heading to the park with Noah. He was excited about possibly being chosen as the baseball team's ace for the next game. We were about to go to our usual practice spot when we ran into Sandra. Her son was usually a regular in the team, and I assumed it was the same that time. But she seemed downcast today. Curiously, I greeted her and asked, "Is something wrong with your son, Sandra?" Her response was sharp, pointing at my child.
Your kid took my son's position. All his hard work for nothing, beaten by a poor kid.
Seeing her hold her son, I realized why she treated me like an enemy at the tea party. Noah had taken the ace position her son had, and she resented me for it. Needless to say, Noah had also worked hard, and team positions are the coach's decision, not ours. However, she probably couldn't accept it with her high pride.
Hand that regular spot over to my son right now. I have all the money you could want. How much do you need?
Her words infuriated me. It was only natural, considering she was trying to buy Noah's hard-earned regular spot with money. Annoyed, I shot back at her. We don't need your money. My son earned his regular spot through his own efforts. Besides, even your son wouldn't want a spot that was bought with money. Her son looked down and nodded slightly at my words. Seeing that, I glared at her with frustration. Clearly, she didn't appreciate my attitude.
Impudent woman. You think you've won just because you're poor?
With those words, she roughly grabbed her son's hand and stormed off. Since that day, we hadn't talked much. It seemed like our friends noticed the change too. Due to the rumors spread by Sandra, everyone sided with her. I started being avoided even by friends I was close to and felt isolated even when cheering for Noah's baseball games. Despite that, I wanted to support him, so I tried to act as usual. Cheering loudly for Noah and trying to remain cheerful, I sometimes felt the stinging gazes from others. Yet, I refused to be intimidated by Sandra's threats and continued to stand my ground. I was aware of the rumors about me, mostly spread by her. In a way, that made me even more determined to maintain a strong stance. Then one day, as I was getting ready to leave after the game, Sandra approached me with some friends.
Hi. You're as stubborn as ever. Anyway, I'm hosting a dinner at my house. I've invited all members of the baseball team, so you're welcome to come if you want.
I frowned at her words. I never expected her to invite me, especially given our bad relationship.
I really want you to come. I don't want to continue like this. It's pitiful to see you standing alone. Your son will eventually realize what's happening. Imagine how he'll react when he knows his mother is suffering because of himself. You understand, don't you?
She kept looking at me with her challenging gaze. I simply replied without averting her eyes, understood.
That's great. And bring your husband too. It's good for him to socialize as well. Besides, you'd feel uneasy coming alone, right? My husband will be there too, so invite yours. I'll send the details and date in the team chat,
said she before turning and leaving. The friends around us looked anxious throughout the exchange. After watching Sandra's retreating figure, I was left with a bitter expression. Honestly, I had a bad feeling. It was clear she was plotting something. Therefore, before she could make her move, I decided to take the initiative. The day of the dinner arrived. George had an urgent work commitment, so he was going to be late. I called Sandra early in the morning to let her know. When she heard about George's emergency work, she laughed mockingly and said, "It's sad when children suffer because their parents have low-paying jobs." Her usual sarcasm, you know? After a while of her usual snide remarks, she hung up. I was upset but continued preparing to head to my parents' house, just a few minutes' walk from ours. Since George took my car for work, I decided to borrow a car from my parents. After getting the car, I headed straight to Sandra's place. Approaching the area, I joined a line of friends also driving there. Sandra was directing friends to a parking lot near her house, which she managed, so parking was hassle-free. When it was my turn, Sandra looked surprised at my car. No wonder, since I wasn't in my usual car but my parents' luxury vehicle.
Ashley! Hey, roll down the window! Why are you in such a luxury car? It's the same model as my family's car. Did you buy it just to compete with me?
Despite her assertive words, she looked shaken. I rolled down the window and greeted her smiling.
I had to borrow it from my parents. Sandra, do you know about my father?
She scowled at me.
I wouldn't know anything about a poor family. Then I'll introduce you later,
I said, driving into the parking lot as instructed. She stood there, mouth agape, watching me leave. Thank you for the invitation today, I told Sandra after parking, handing her a cake I brought as a gift. On that day, I wasn't in my usual casual attire. I dressed appropriately for her dinner party, including some discreet branded accessories. She bit her lip and confronted me.
Explain yourself. How can someone like you afford high-end brand accessories and cakes from upscale shops?
Her loud voice drew the attention of friends around us. Amidst the gathered attention, I calmly answered her questions. I haven't mentioned it, but I'm the daughter of a film company president. This cake is recommended by my mother for attending your dinner. I chose the clothes myself. Is there a problem? Her mouth fell open again. She remained frozen for a while before finally speaking in a strained voice.
A film company? You mean where my husband works?
Unbelieving, I showed her a family photo with my father, who was also featured on the film company's website, thinking it would convince her. Still, she refused to believe.
That's a lie. It's just a photo you took when you met somewhere, right? I don't believe it. So, you rented a luxury car and wore high-end brand clothes, bringing a cake from a famous store, all because of the harassment, right?
No, I just chose an outfit and a gift suitable for the occasion. I borrowed the car from my parents because my husband had an urgent job.
A poor person like you being the daughter of a president is just a story, not reality. Stop joking. Do you really want to reconcile with me? I invited you here, offering a chance to apologize.
She yelled hysterically, throwing and stomping on the cake I brought as a gift. I was utterly appalled by her behavior, which was far from someone wanting to reconcile. As her shouting echoed through the yard, a man hurried out from the house, probably worried about her. It was her husband, David. When our eyes met, I smiled at him, which seemed to shock him.
What? The president's daughter here?
His surprise prompted Sandra to turn to him sharply. Despite her intimidating demeanor, David politely greeted me.
Good evening, ma'am. I'm David, nice to meet you. What brings you here today? Anything wrong with the president?
Worried, I turned to him and explained, I was invited by Sandra. His reaction was one of sheer astonishment.
Wow, you two are acquaintances. I didn't know that. The world is indeed small. How did you two meet?
Our sons are on the same baseball team. There was a little conflict when my son replaced your son as a regular, but Sandra invited me here today to make amends. Seems I'm not welcome, though. He then turned to Sandra, suspecting something.
Sandra, tell me. The poor person you always talk about is.
She started sweating profusely. Seemingly she had been bad-mouthing me at home too. Realizing that, I narrowed my eyes. She got in panic and started to deny everything, clinging to David.
It's not her. She's the daughter of a film company president. It can't be. We're actually good friends, right?
Ignoring her pleading glance, I remained expressionless. After what she had done, I had no intention of saving her face. As I was about to retort, someone tapped my shoulder. When I looked back, there was my husband, George. Sorry for being late. I finished work earlier than I thought, so I came. Is something wrong? He had a suspicious look on his face. He looked at Sandra and David, and it seemed like he had noticed something as he spoke. Remember me? We talked at work recently.
Of course, you're the upcoming president.
Then, George blushed and said, Not sure yet. He scratched his head. Seeing their exchange, Sandra was speechless with shock. I picked up the trampled cake and handed it back to her. Do you believe me now? Visibly shaken, she tried to appease me with an ingratiating tone.
I had no idea of your status. I'm so sorry for everything.
She pleaded, but I shook my head. Don't worry about it. We were never close friends to begin with. There's no point in pretending now. My response visibly shocked her, prompting David to ask in a low tone, What's that about? He said. Frightened, Sandra looked at me with a pale face. Sandra has been making snide remarks to me for a while now. She even complained when our son earned a regular spot on the team, offering to pay for it, and when I refused, she started harassing me. She invited me today to make amends, but it's fine. We're leaving. I laid out Sandra's actions to David, who then glared at her angrily. After sharing a smile with George, we left the scene. Following the incident at Sandra's house, the harassment stopped. Besides, the story spread among the team mothers, isolating her instead. The other mothers, seeing her downfall, suddenly started cozying up to me. I couldn't bring myself to like them though. Fond of being in a group, Sandra might be struggling, but I had no intention of helping. It was all her doing. Eventually, Sandra left the baseball team as her misdeeds were exposed. That caused David to be furious with her. Her access to money was also reduced. Her misconduct became neighborhood gossip. Although they were some exaggerated, given her character, I couldn't help but wonder if some were true. However, when whispers of relief about her not getting divorced circulated, I felt a pang of sympathy. Time passed, and Noah moved up to elementary school. Sandra's son, apparently attending a private school, meant no future interactions between us. Noah continued to excel in baseball, and George and I worked even harder to ensure he could pursue his passion without any hindrance.